If you love bokeh, you are gonna get it.
The Fuji X-T3 and the Sony A7 III are great entry-level cameras in 2022, and we want to talk a little bit about why we chose these cameras. Why did I buy the Fuji X-T3? Well, mainly because at the time when it came out, it was an APS-C camera, which is my preferred format for video, and it was decently priced and actually pretty cheaply priced compared to the competition for what you were getting. Not only that, it offered 4K 60p at 10-bit. Very few cameras at that time could offer that.
I'm a photographer and videographer, and at the time I wanted a camera that could help me with both and at a reasonable price, and one that was a full frame, because I came from an A6300, which was a crop sensor, and I needed a camera that could let in a lot more light and a camera that could just allow me to essentially focus on the composition and just getting the moment, whilst the camera just basically gets the focus for me.
Video for me was very important, and even in 2022, the Fuji X-T3 still to me is unmatched in the APS-C market. Now, the most important thing for me was the 4K 10-bit 50p, and I needed to have that in the camera because I wanted that extra quality. But I didn't want to pay over like 2-3 grand for a camera because I felt like it wasn't a good return value, and the full frame options at the time, while they were great, they weren't exactly hitting the correct price point. I needed to have a log format as well. The Fuji for me produced really nice colors in video. I had a good strong codec. We can shoot all intro long op. We can do external out to ProRes 422. And really it just sort of fitted in every single marker box that I had when I was looking for a camera for video. The only camera that did sort of like entice me was actually the Blackmagic cameras, but I couldn't take pictures on them as well, and I really needed a hybrid camera for the kind of content that I did. So that was the one thing that kind of swayed me away from it, and also the horrible battery life and the amount of rigging that I had to do with it. And you know, it's a great camera and great image quality, but when you're talking about like an all-in-one package that provides you with compactability and effectiveness on the field, that for me was the X-T3.
I didn't actually get this camera specifically for video, and at the time I actually wanted a camera that could handle photography and video well, like I said before, because at the time I also did a bit of freelance video and a bit of freelance photography. And I actually upgraded from the A6300, which was an APS-C camera, and it was a crop frame camera. And it was a really good camera at the time for me, but what I didn't like about it was when I was like shooting interviews in 4K, for example, the battery would die in like literally 20, 30 minutes if you're lucky. I could probably shoot on this for a solid, well not solid, maybe like an hour on and off. That was one reason I actually moved on to the A7 III. The other one was the full frame sensor. The full frame sensor is extremely useful because, like I said before, a lot of what I shoot is really run and gun with video and photography, and I needed a sensor that could take in as much light as possible, basically. So the A7 III actually has 14 stops of dynamic range. I think that's when you use S-Log as well, which is what I actually use most of the time. It's a bit of a delicate picture profile, but once you get used to it, it's actually not that bad when you put it through editing. Initially, you're gonna have a bit of a hard time sort of playing around with it and making sure you get the right exposure. But once you do, in editing, you can bring out a lot of colors with it. So using S-Log, you can actually bring out surprisingly a fair amount of detail and a fair amount of color into your video. It's obviously not 10-bit, 422 by any means, and that's something I wish I had. It's something I love to play with, but it's not something I needed, and I don't think it's something that everybody needs. When I'm shooting interview videos, I essentially leave the auto face detection on pretty much nearly all the time, unless I know that that person or the subject that I'm shooting is going to be standing absolutely still.
photography is really what attracted me to the Fuji X-T3, as it wasn't something that I was mainly focused in, but it was something I wanted to try. And having come from like Canon and Panasonic, although they were decent photography cameras, and arguably the Canon is probably a better photography camera overall, just for me, it just didn't feel like a tool that I wanted to use. And I think that's really important as a creative, whether you're just like mainly a photographer or mainly videographer. You want to be able to have fun with the camera that you're using. For me, the X-T3, one of the biggest selling points was the film emulation. Now, if you're into film recipes, go and check it out if you don't know anything about that, about the Fuji system. But Fujifilm is well known now for the film emulation properties. So you can have like recipes on like Fuji X Weekly and other sites I'll link down below, and you can actually get like a list of recipes. So you've got like Kodak Portra, you've got the black and white film stocks. When you're shooting film photography, you don't get to see the results until the end, whereas with this camera, you kind of like, you're cheating it and you're able to see it there and then. It's not obviously to the same sort of level, but it's pretty damn close, and the colors, like you can get really close colors.
So actually going on from the topic of colors in the camera for photography, if I compare the A7 III to the X-T3, I will say that the A7 III doesn't have, at least in my opinion, the best colors that come out straight out of the camera compared to the X-T3. The X-T3, from what I've seen, has a really good retro look to it straight out of camera, and to be honest, I think you don't really have to do a lot of editing to it, right? A very minimal amount of editing. With the A7 III, the colors are definitely not the best. I will say some people might disagree with me, but that's just my opinion. So my work involves a lot of portraiture photography, taking photos of people. And because of that, I do rely a lot on the face detection and eye detection on my A7 III, which is, in my opinion, absolutely amazing. Even in pretty low lighting as well, it's pretty reliable. So there's actually no eye autofocus on video on this, but the face detection on this is still great. It carries on to video. That's just one of the reasons why I actually like the A7 III for video as well. So would I get the A7 III in 2022, and would I recommend it for 2022? Simple answer, yes. Longer answer is a good hybrid camera between video and photography without any of the high-end specs that you probably don't need if you're looking for a camera that's around 1,300 or 1,000 pounds. You're gonna obviously move on to that high-end camera, spending that extra grand if you wanna take it to that next level, but for beginners, it's honestly a great camera, both for video and photography.
The Fuji X-T3 in 2022 is a great low-budget camera. Chipping in at around under £700, you can easily get that paired with a couple of lenses for under 1,200 quid. Now that's really hard to beat on the market when you think about 4K, 50p, 10-bit, or 60p for you Americans. And I think really you're looking at superb color, decent enough autofocus. I mean, like right now it's on the autofocus using a Viltrox lens, which isn't even native, and if I get a bit closer, it should still keep on to me. So if I'm looking right now, it does a decent enough job. So now for me, when we're talking about the A7 III and the X-T3 together, I think that these are great cameras, and we are lucky to be in a time where these options can be had for so cheap. And it's great to know that when someone who wants to start out in videography or photography can have these great budget options. And I think that when we compare it to the higher end of the market, I don't know whether the higher jump towards the more expensive end of the cameras is worth that much more than the lower end. And I think we're starting to see like the gap close a bit, and it's becoming a lot harder for technology to kind of make it worthwhile to spend that much more money. And I think these cameras will still last another 2 to 3 years before we start seeing like vast improvements in technology. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and our thoughts on the Sony A7 III and the Fuji X-T3 and how they're still relevant today in 2022. I've been your host, Alex Lifey.
I'm Sharky.
And we'll see you again soon, hopefully. Like and subscribe, all that for jazz. See you later on. Peace. What did you do?
I moved slightly.
No, with your hand. You did the little...
I went there.
What's that?
I don't know what that is. I'm just going...
It's like a... Okay.
Is that going to be like where you showed the video there?
The Fuji X-T3 is a great low-budget camera for the... Hopefully you've enjoyed our thoughts on the Fuji X-T3 and the A7 III. I've been your hopes? I've been your hope, your faith, your desire.
He's not really anyone's hopes, really.
And Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and you enjoyed the...
Okay, no, it's fine, it's fine. Just...